Good day and welcome to Alena TV. We are broadcasting from Toronto, Canada. I am Elsa Abraham. And in today's episode, we are going to bring you African news. Let's go for a quick break. When we come back, we'll go for the news in details. Now, welcome back from that short break. In our headlines for today, conflict looms in Ethiopia as tensions between Addis Ababa and Tigray region escalate. Sudan's sign military cooperation deal. Egypt also stresses importance of adhering to previous AU resolutions on reaching binding deal in the JED talks. And in our last story for the day, Turkey earthquake. Rescue efforts continues as death toll rises. Now let's go for our news in details. Fears of war and possibility breakup of Ethiopia were raised over the weekend as the northern Tigray region blocked a military appointment of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government. The unnamed brigadier general is said to have flown north to Tigray on Thursday evening, but returned to the capital Addis Ababa after being told his appointment would not be considered legitimate. Senior Tigray People's Liberation Front official Getachew Reda said that any appointment or troop movement is totally unacceptable. The party, which rules the Tigray Regional Parliament, said that the PM no longer has a mandate for such moves. The row between the powerful northern state and the government threatens to escalate into a full-blown war. Analysts have warned and could even see the region break away and split the Ethiopian state. Tensions escalated last month when Tigray passed ahead with regional elections in defiance of Addis Ababa. Mr. Abiy, who delayed a national poll which was due to take place in March, citing coronavirus pandemic. He deemed the election unconstitutional, sparking a dispute that led to federal parliamentarians calling for Addis Ababa to cut funding to the Tigray parliament. Ethiopia's Tigray region is one of the 10 autonomous states in the country riven by tribal and ethnic conflicts. It is controlled by the TPLF, a powerful force in national politics since its army overthrew the JED regime in 1991. But it has been locked in a power play with the Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed since refusing to merge into his Prosperity Party, which replaced the Ethiopian People's Revolution Democratic Front. Tensions have risen over the control of federal military personnel based in Tigray, with Mr. Abiy Ahmed's plan to reshuffle the leadership of the armed forces in the region being rejected. An international crisis group report warned today that the standoff could trigger a damaging conflict that may even rip the Ethiopian state asunder. Now moving on to our next story for today, Sudan signs military cooperation deal. The government of Sudan and South Sudan on Thursday signed a joint military cooperation agreement aimed at providing armed training, peace, and development between two countries. Last week, South Sudan's unity government delegation, headed by the Minister for Defense and Veterans Affairs, Angelina Teny, Interior Minister Paul Mayom Aket, and Beatrice Kamisa Wani, Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation Minister, traveled to the Sudanese capital Khartoum for bilateral talks. According to Sudanese media, the two countries on Thursday signed a memorandum of understanding on provision of military training, peace and development, promotion and resolving the issues of dispute at Abyei border. The deal was signed by Sudan and South Sudan's Ministers for Defense, Ibrahim Yassin and Angelina Teny. Looking into the borders reopened as part of the deal, the two countries on Friday opened 10 entry points along their borders in a move to boost trade between the two countries. They also launched a free trade zone area in Jeblin area of the White Nile state in Sudan. The opened entry points are situated in northern Bahr el Ghazal, Upper Nile Unity, Rarab, and western Bahr el Ghazal states. Addressing members of the press in Khartoum on Friday, South Sudan's Defense Minister Teny welcomed the reopening of the entry points as a great commitment towards the cooperation agreement. The two heads of state are the ones leading these efforts, and this may be the first time a huge step like this is taking place in the implementation of the cooperation agreement between the two countries, said Teny. South Sudan and Sudan had closed much of the 2,000-kilometer border in 2012, hitting traders and communities on both sides of the disputed line. The two sisterly countries have experienced protracted social conflict and loss of revenue due to a decline in oil production and prices. They have also witnessed insignificant foreign investment since 2011, though the value of their currencies has weakened, creating a situation of hyperinflation and increased poverty. 2012 cooperation agreement. The Khartoum meeting provided a platform for the two countries to review the cooperation agreement they failed to implement in the last 8 years. The 2012 bilateral deal addresses issues of cross-border trade, movement, residence, property, ownership, and work. After the independence of South Sudan, the two countries agreed on post-referendum relations tackling the status of nationals of both countries in each state border, trade, and cooperation on central banking. They also settled on payment of post-service benefits for South Sudanese nationals who previously worked in a united Sudan. In addition, other issues agreed upon were the division of assets and liabilities, oil transits, areas and claims, and a joint approach to settling international debts. South Sudan agreed to offer transitional financial assistance to compensate Sudan for loss of most of the oil revenue. Sudan, on the other hand, agreed to allow South Sudanese to travel freely across its borders, settle, work, and own properties anywhere in Sudan. But the cooperation between collapsed shortly after the two countries went to war over the oil-rich areas of the Helgli, the Panto, and the Abe in 2012, according to observers. The two countries have since then paid little or no attention to this agreement. Moving on to our next story for today, Egypt stresses the importance of adhering to previous AU resolutions on reaching binding deal in Jared talks. The three countries agreed last week that Khartoum would host talks which aim to set a time frame and a new framework for the renewed negotiations. Egypt said it has stressed during revived talks on the disputed Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam on the importance of implementing the previous African Union resolutions in reaching a binding legal accord over the filling and operations of the dam. According to an official statement, Egypt's Irrigation and Water Resources Ministry stressed during renewed talks on the Sudan with Ethiopian and Sudanese counterparts on reaching a binding deal and achieving the common interest of the three countries while guaranteeing its water interest. A session will be held on Monday in the attendance of legal and technical representatives from Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia to mull negotiations means in the coming period and discuss proposals for the three countries. It said, with the outcomes of the session reported later to the ministers in three countries on Tuesday. Earlier on Sunday morning, Sudan has called for giving the AU a bigger role in facilitating a deal between Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan over the filling and operation of the dam. According to an official statement, Sudan's Irrigation Ministry said talks between the three countries saw Khartoum offering its vision for abandoning the previous unproductive means of negotiations and replacing it with more effective approaches. The resumption of the negotiations came days after Khartoum called for a new one-week round of talks aiming to revive the stalled negotiations. Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan agreed last week that Khartoum will host the talks, which aim to set a time frame and a new framework for the renewed negotiations. Tuesday's meeting, which was proposed by South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, who is the current chair of the AU, was the first since negotiations ceased 7 weeks ago. The Sudanese negotiation team proposed on Sunday that talks continue under a specific timetable and that clear outcomes must be reported to the AU Commission. Sunday's meeting also saw extensive talks on the expected roles of observers and experts during the next round of negotiations. The ministers agreed on continuing talks through a 6-person team that includes 2 representatives from each country. The team will be mandated with certain reference framework for how experts will facilitate negotiations between the 3 countries, and it will prepare a report to be handed on to the irrigation ministers of the 3 countries on Tuesday. Egypt relies heavily on its crucial water supplies from the river Nile, pulled out of talks in late August after 3 countries failed to reach a consensus on the legal and technical points of contention after Ethiopia proposed a package of non-binding guidelines for the filling and the operation of the mega dam. The resumption of negotiations last week came days after the U.S. President Donald Trump laid the blame squarely on Ethiopia for the failure of the negotiations and said that Cairo's concern in the dispute are legitimate. Trump told Sudanese Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok in a phone call that he had brokered a deal to resolve the crisis, but that Ethiopia had broken that pact, pushing him to halt aid the country. He said that Egypt could blow up that dam, which Ethiopia described as an incitement of war. The dredge, built 15 kilometers from the Ethiopian border with Sudan, has been a source of contention between the 3 countries since its construction began in 2010. The first filling of the controversial dam took place this summer, despite Ethiopia not having reached a binding agreement with its downstream neighbors. Cairo fears the massive hydropower project will significantly reduce its crucial water supplies from the Nile River, while Sudan fears it could endanger the safety of its own dams. Ethiopia says the 6,000 megawatt dam is key to its development and its hopes for becoming Africa's biggest electricity exporter. Moving on to our last story for the day, Turkey's earthquake rescue efforts continue as death toll rises. Rescue workers in the Turkish port city of Izmir are continuing to search for the survivors on Friday's deadly earthquake, as officials said the death toll has increased to at least 64 persons. The powerful 6.6 magnitude earthquake has claimed at least 62 lives in Turkey, and 2 teenagers died on the Greek island of Samos. Nearly 900 people were injured. 2/3 of them have now been discharged from the hospital. The quake triggered tidal waves that hit the Turkish and the Greek islands. Over a dozen buildings in Izmir were severely damaged or destroyed by the initial quakes and the hundreds of aftershocks that ensued. Parts of the city were also flooded by seawater. Rescue teams are scouring through the rubble of collapsed buildings for a 3rd day looking for survivors. Shortly after midnight, Ahmed Sitem, 70, was pulled from the rubble of a building in Izmir. Health Minister Koka said in a tweet, "I never lost my hope. It is unclear how many people remain trapped under the rubble." Turkish media reported 3 more people were pulled out Sunday after the collapsed apartment building, but their conditions were not known. Turkey is prone to earthquakes. In 1999, 2 powerful quakes killed some 18,000 people in northwestern Turkey. Earthquakes are frequent in Greece as well. In a raw show In a rare show of unity amid months of tense bilateral relations, Greek and Turkey government officials issued mutual messages of solidarity over the earthquake toll. The quake occurred as Turkey was already struggling with an economic downturn on the coronavirus pandemic. More than 10,000 people in Turkey have died from the coronavirus pandemic. This is where we end today's episode of African News. Please like, share, comment, let us know your thoughts on this particular episode. If there is any news happening in your country, you can just alert us in the comment section below. Make sure you subscribe, hit the notification button so you'll be notified anytime we make a post. Thanks for watching.